Today's readings feature one of my go-to scriptures in hard times and one of my go-to poems, and a passage from Jesus' time with his disciples at the Last Supper from the Gospel of John, which, if you have read the Gospel of John, you know that this conversation goes on and on and on and on, and it's hard to pick just one snippet of it. I suspect if they'd had music, and they may well have at that supper, it could have been a song like the one we just heard. It was a curious pep talk that Jesus supplied to his disciples at that Last Supper. Part of it was very much about love one another as I have loved you. This is your best parting gift to me. Love one another as I have loved you, and love one another with this agape love. The Greek word is agape. It's a self-sacrificing love for one another. The second of his messages was, when I go away, and I am going away, the spirit that flowed between God and I is going to be given to you and will flow between you and God. It's like I am leaving you with the force, only better. And then the third part of his message, which we focus on in today's reading, is what I call the I never promised you a rose garden part of his conversation. He talks about how hard it is going to be out in the world for them because they are not going along with the world's agenda. But you've got this, he tells them. Don't forget that spirit thing I told you about. Don't forget to love one another. And indeed, it was hard for them as they went out and engaged in the world in a way that did not coincide with the world's agenda. 10 of the 12 disciples wound up being martyred. May have been 11, depends on how you count. So, like I said, a curious pep talk. Let's see if it has something to say to us. Second, is a reminder to Timothy to stir up the gift, to fan the flame of his faith into a full fire. And whoever wrote to him, perhaps Paul, perhaps likely one of Paul's disciples, reminded him that God did not give us the spirit of fear. The Greek is delos, of fearfulness or timidity or cowardice. You'll see it translated all different ways in different translations. The picture is one who is in a state of fear because of a lack of courage or inner strength. God did not give us this spirit, but stir up the gift of God that God did give you, and you'll find God's spirit of power and God's spirit of sacrificial love and God's spirit of self-control. And finally, one of my favorite go-to poems, and I suspect one of many of yours, by Jalaluddin Rumi, who was a 13th century poet, theologian, and Sufi mystic. His poems have been translated into most of the languages of the world. He's a man who knew suffering and fear. When he was about 8 years old, Mongol invasions forced his family to leave their home in what is present-day Afghanistan, and 7 years later to finally settle in what's now south-central Turkey. 7 centuries later, and a half a world away, Rumi is one of America's best-selling poets year after year, and for very good reason.
A reading from the Gospel of John. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. If the world hates you, be aware that it hated me before it hated you. If you belong to the world would love you as its own, because you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. Therefore, the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, servants are not greater than their master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also, but they will do all these things to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. And now a reading from 2 Timothy. I am grateful to God, whom I worship with a clear conscience, as my ancestors did, when I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day. Recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that lived first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure lives in you. For this reason, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. And finally, Keep Walking by Rumi. Keep walking, though there's no place to get to. Don't try to see through the distances. That's not for human beings. Move within, but don't move the way fear makes you move. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground.
Let's pray. Beloved God, open our eyes, our ears, our imagination. Stir up the gifts within us which you have given, that we may live beyond fear, that we may find within these words today ways to anchor our souls and keep us grounded in your love, that we might live in sacrificial love and power and self-control. Amen. There, I'm done. Actually, if you were here, and how I wish you were, I'm wondering so much, how are you doing? And I know some of you have told me through email, and I apologize that I am so behind in my email. That probably tells you a little of how I'm doing. We are in week 32, more or less, of pandemic living, and a little over 2 weeks away from Election Day. Our president refuses to say if he will accept election results. And just last night at a rally in Michigan, he encouraged the governor to open up the state. The crowd responded by chanting, "Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up." And he replied, "Lock them all up." I'm quite concerned about the election, and more than that, I'm concerned about the aftermath of the election. To be quite honest, I'm fearful about the aftermath of the election, and I'm not alone in that. The Carter Center has done some polling and found that 71% of Americans are fearful that violence will break out after the election. As the days before November 3rd alternately drag by and race by, I don't know if I want it to get here faster or if I want to savor every sweet pre-election day. So I've taken more than an academic interest in today's topic of how we can take advantage of the very nature of the waiting to rekindle our courage. First, let's be clear, there is no shame in being afraid. World War I flying ace Eddie Rickenbacker often said, "Courage is doing what you are afraid to do. Where there is fear, there could be no courage." Similarly, Nelson Mandela said he learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over the fear. The brave person is not the one who never feels afraid, but the one who conquers that fear. And if I understand Aristotle right, he said that the courageous person is both fearful and bold in the right time, in the right manner, and for the right reasons, moving ahead with something in the middle that moves beyond the fear but does not move all the way to ill-considered rashness. If you too are feeling fearful, we're in the good company of, well, 71% of Americans, of Eddie Rickenbacker, of Nelson Mandela, of Aristotle, and of many, many more who have found courage despite or even because of or through their fear. After all, how else would we find courage? Courage is the ability to face and deal with dangerous or difficult situations. I remember in another church a long time ago talking with a parishioner who was facing their first big life crisis well into this person's 40s and said, you know, in a way this is a relief. I always wondered what I was made of. Courage is the mental strength, the moral stamina to resist oppression, to face danger, to endure hardship. And like other strength, like other stamina, courage can be exercised. It can be strengthened. The word itself comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. You could say that courage is a heart muscle. But in fact, courage comes in many forms, and it hides in amazing places. Courage is what we often think of, bravery in the face of danger. It's also tenacity in the face of oppression. It's action in the face of resistance. It's steadfastness in the face of despair. One of the hardest parts of this waiting time is the way it opens us to vulnerability and fear. And one of the gifts of the waiting time is how it also opens us to finding and growing and strengthening our courage. Back in March, about a week into the shutdown, both the firm I have my IRAs invested in and the United Church of Christ Pension Fund sent out emails saying they had shut down. They forgot to say that what they really meant to say was they had closed their offices and were working from home. They just said that they shut down. And I saw the emails late at night on the same day. And if you've hung around the United Church of Christ, you know that the pension board is the rock solid, never fail, can always be trusted forever and ever and ever, amen, part of the United Church of Christ. And here I get this email from them saying they've shut down. And that stage in the pandemic, I couldn't see anyway how the economy could survive the shutdown. And here seemed to be confirmation that my savings would soon be completely gone as well. It was a tough stretch. It stretched my courage, it stretched my faith. I had a real come to Jesus that brought me two realizations. First was, why did I think that I would get to live my life in a patch of history unsullied by world war, economic depression, or pandemic, or something similar? Welcome to the woes of human history, because most people do live in a stretch of something or some things like that. Why did I think I would be otherwise? And secondly, I fairly quickly had a realization that it was never about the savings. It was never about the security. It was never about the retirement. And if that's gone well, my life was about something different anyway. It was about a different pursuit. And my life is and always is in God's hands. Now, thinking you know that is one thing, right? Or thinking you might know that is one thing. But knowing that you know that is a great gift. It also reminded me that I still carry around remnants of what I call fourth grader theology, that promises if I'm a good kid and I follow the rules, God will take care of me and mine, and nothing really bad will ever happen. Of course, we know that's not how life works. Even to his disciples, Jesus said, hey, if you went along with the world's agenda, then the world would love you. But you are called to live out the agenda of the kingdom of God. And therefore, there are going to be times when the world is going to hate you. Remember, they hated me first. Remember, they persecuted me first, he says. they're going to persecute you too. But before that reading and after that reading, he's reminding them that the counselor, the Holy Spirit, is going to come once he's gone. And he says, the Holy Spirit, who God will send in my name, will come to you and teach you all things, help you understand everything I've ever said to you. And then he gave them this gift. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give you peace. My peace I give to you. So let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. And similarly, years down the road, an aging Paul, or more likely a disciple of Paul's, encouraged Timothy and wrote, I remember your sincere faith, a faith you inherited from your mother and from her mother, and dwells in you. It's time to rekindle that gift, to open up your heart and let the steady glow of the embers burst into flame. Because God did not give us a gift of fearfulness or cowardice. That comes from someplace else. That comes from the rest of the world. That comes from the internet, I'm sure he meant to say. God gives us the spirit of power and the spirit of agape love, self-sacrificial love for one another. God gives us the spirit of self-discipline and self-control. Stir up those gifts. Rekindle the gifts of the Spirit. Okay, good wisdom there. But how? How do we do that? That's the question, isn't it? What I distill from all of that are, how many things? 3 things, 4 things. I think the first is to acknowledge and confront our fear, because denying it is only going to send it into hiding. It's going to send it down into those deep Jungian recesses of the soul to pop up later in some inappropriate, horrible way. Remember Rumi's wisdom, don't move the way fear makes you move. Keep moving, but don't move the way fear makes you move. We know that because neurologists tell us that fear can move us into paralysis. Think of fearful deer who just stand stock still and try to pretend that you're not going to see them if they don't move. Or think of what neurologists tell us about the fight or flight impulse of people who just want, don't you sometimes just want to hide under the covers until this is all over? Turn off all the news? Or sometimes, wouldn't it just feel better to fight? You know, to tell that second cousin what you really think. Wouldn't that feel good sometimes? Or maybe even to go out into the street and vent, as so many have. Fight or flight and paralysis, that's where fear can make us move. Fear can make us move to quiet despair. Fear can make us move to frenzied binge watching. Do you know how much of the Great British Baking Show I've been watching? Fear can move us to endless doom scrolling of online news and, God forbid, the comments. Don't move the way fear makes you move. Rather, and here's the second thing, do what you can, if you can, to impact in the way you can the pandemic, the election, whatever it is that is bringing you fear. And if you're not in a position to impact that, then give thanks to those who are. And maybe send them an encouraging note or email, pat on the back, pick up the phone. Third, cultivate connection with God. If there is anything I've been doing in this season, more than trying unsuccessfully to keep up with email, binge watching the Great British Baking Show, and a little bit obsessively trying to play the piano, it would be praying. I find that my days are just awful if I don't hem them in with both morning and nighttime prayer and meditation. You know, we publish a calendar here in the church with 12 different types of prayer. We practice them 1 month at a time throughout the year. Find one or a different one that works for you and commit to it, morning and evening. Or pray through music, as Rumi did. Take down a musical instrument. There are hundreds of ways, he said, to kneel and kiss the ground. And do this not because you ought to, but do it for your own soul's sanity. Finally, cultivate connection with one another. Love God, love one another was Jesus' parting plea to his disciples, and I believe it is also his plea to us all these years later. Cultivate connection with one another across the chasms in our society if you can. I tried yesterday, it didn't go so well, I'll try again. Remember how much that we have in common. That Carter Center poll I told you about that said that 71% of us are living in fear. Well, that's something we have in common right there, isn't it? That both sides across the chasm are living in great fear. We have other common ground. Nearly 90% of us cite our roles in our families as the most important aspect of our identity. We love our families. 3 out of 4 say that being an American is vital to them. And close to 70% are exhausted by the division in our country. So there's things that we have in common. We love our families, we love our country, we're exhausted. That's something to talk about, isn't it? It's not maybe the safest time or the most encouraging time to reach out across the chasms, but if you've got somebody you might have some success with, give it a try. Cultivate connection with one another in your neighborhoods, in your family, in the church. In the church, it's been so hard to stay connected when we're behind the wall of electrons. It's so hard in this pandemic, and we're trying in the council, in member care, and staff meetings to figure out an organized way for the congregation, for all of us, to be checking in with each other in a systematic way. Until then, I urge you, please join us for one of the coffee hours, at least for the next 3 weeks. Join us for Life Stories tomorrow night. Those are wonderful happenings. But do join us for coffee hours. We'll be discussing the sermon, as I said earlier in one of them, and the other, we're going to have some good connecting questions to help you, well, connect with one another and help generate that spirit of agape love promised it to us in challenging times. And maybe, just maybe, as UCC Minister Mary Luty has written, our fears can become a bridge to others, an empathetic tie that binds us together in love. That dreadfully slow and all too fast waiting time with its anxiety, worry, and dread about what may or may not happen, this is the soul-sucking spirit of fear, and it is very real, and it does not come from God. But it contains within it some great gifts if we can extract them. A reminder to rekindle the gift of God within us, a spirit of power and love and self-control. A reminder to open ourselves to activating our courage, that our fear is not the opposite of courage. Our fear is what God helps us through in order to strengthen our courage, to give us bravery in the face of danger, tenacity in the face of oppression, action in the face of resistance, and steadfastness in the face of despair. It's a reminder to cultivate our connections with God and to cultivate our connections with one another. Will we do this perfectly? Oh, no, we will not. But let's not let that keep us from trying. It has been our motto all along with the staff and with the leadership during the pandemic, to strive for connection, not perfection. And the truth is, we will not even achieve connection perfectly, but you already know that. So I want to close with quoting Mary Luty again, who wrote in an early pandemic UCC devotional. She said, "It would be great if we were all at our rational best right now, but we're not. Optimal if we all rose brilliantly to this occasion, but we won't. So the next best thing is to dismount our high horses, Summon some empathy from that quavering place inside us where we too feel afraid. Cut each other some slack and be kind and loving with the Spirit's help. Always, always loving.